I think we just learned the hard way that like nothing will work with AI if the data is not accurate enough. So it's very much a garbage in, garbage out. And that's how we got to where we are today. I think a lot of revenue operators think that their situation is uniquely bad. I've spoken with probably more than 1,000 Rails people at this point. It's not unique. Like everyone has data challenges. We did a test a few months ago where we took 5 like proof of concepts and we anonymized and aggregated the data. And 86% of records in a CRM have some kind of entity data error. But I actually think AI has done us a bit of a favor in the sense that it's now very, very visible that the data is not good enough to reliably do things in an automated way. It's just that we used to live in this world where we accepted the fact that we would have hundreds of people who would work around the data inaccuracies. You know, like you look inside of Salesforce, like you might not be able to trust it.
Welcome to Go-to-Market Science. In this podcast, we share tangible, actionable playbooks from the trenches, working as go-to-market strategy and RevOps consultants for our clients here at Union Square Consulting, and candid conversations with revenue leaders in the market that have been there. Now let's get into it.
Every revenue leader has had this moment. You try to plan territories, run a pipeline review, or deploy an AI tool, and the data underneath it falls apart. Accounts mapped to the wrong parent companies, reps working deals they shouldn't own, inaccurate enrichment, etc. Let's talk about it. Today on Go-to-Market Science, I'm with Anders Krohn, founder and CEO of Kernel. Anders spent years deploying AI into enterprise go-to-market orgs and kept hitting the same wall. The CRM data was too broken for any of it to work. We get into what he keeps finding inside companies like Naven, Gong, and Zip, why the entity and hierarchy layer is the thing that breaks everything else downstream, and how to fix it.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. All right. So give us the quick version. What is Kernel and what problems does the company solve?
Yes. So maybe I can start like how do we get here? And like, why are we here? So the way we started off by building, like many others, it turned out an AI SDR with the purpose of like autonomous prospecting. And really what we learned is that the key blocker to getting agents or humans for that matter to make good decisions in revenue organizations is really like accurate data. Like most CRMs today, they have a ton of data, but usually that data is not accurate enough that you can reliably use AI on top of it. As we went down this rabbit hole of like, how do we get data accuracy to a level where we can reliably use it for making decisions using AI? And so what Kernel is today is what we call agent-first entity data. So entity data is the data about entities. Like, you have a company like Oracle. Oracle has subsidiaries. There's hierarchical linkages. And really, Kernel is the most accurate entity data in the world, specifically aimed at making that data good enough that you can reliably use it for AI to make decisions. And so our big thesis is that we will get to a point where revenue operators will be using tools like Claude Code, tools like Clay to automate a very large part of revenue operations, and that Kernel will become the foundational data layer upon which they do that. And so it's a very exciting time for us. We've been growing very fast. We work with some phenomenal companies and very excited to have the conversation today.
Yeah, awesome. And that's what we talk about that all the time at USCs. You need to have the right data and accurate data consistently in order to implement AI into your systems, because otherwise you're just accelerating and amplifying the completely wrong things, and you have no idea what direction you're actually headed in unless you actually have accurate data to build off of and use AI with. So you guys didn't start out building the data infrastructure company in the beginning, I believe, right? The first product was an autonomous AI SDR. What happened with that?
I mean, I think we just learned the hard way that like nothing will work with AI if the data is not accurate enough. So it's very much a garbage in, garbage out situation. And that's how we got to where we are today.
Okay, so you found the problem. You saw the problem yourself when you were trying to make this thing on
exactly.
Your own. And you're like, you know what? This is actually a problem we should focus on instead.
Yes, we spent like a ton of time inside of Salesforce trying to get this thing to work, and it just didn't work. Like the data was just not good enough to reliably be able to use language models on top of the CRM. And so we said, okay, like let's not focus on that. Let's focus on actually how do we solve this data infrastructure challenge.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys think you'll start doing autonomous AI SDR stuff now, or you too into the data infrastructure stuff now?
I think we see ourselves as like a data infrastructure company. Like data accuracy is really our bread and butter. That's what we promise people. And really the vision for Kernel is like, how do we build like a verified view of the economy that agents can interact with? And I think there are plenty of great tools in the like orchestration, automation space, like tools like Clay, N8N, even the model providers themselves with tools like Claude Code. And so it's much more likely they will start to do data infrastructure for other types of personas than it is that we would start going back into orchestration and automation.
Okay, that's fair. So Kernel works with companies like Naven. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yeah.
Naven, Gong, Zip, AlphaSense. So these large organizations with big go-to-market teams. When your software plugs into their CRMs, what are the patterns that you keep finding? What's consistently broken in these big organizations?
Yeah, so I think a lot of revenue operators think that their situation is uniquely bad, but what I can, they can rest assured, I've spoken with probably more than 1,000 Rails people at this point. It's not unique. Like everyone has data challenges. We did a test a few months ago where we took 5 like proof concepts and we anonymized and aggregated the data, and 86% of records in a CRM have some kind of entity data error. So like it would be like the wrong name, the wrong website, wrong legal name, wrong headcount, wrong revenue. And so CRMs are consistently broken in somewhat unique ways, but there are patterns. And I'd say the most consistent pattern that's a bit of a sort of like earned insight is that a lot of data inaccuracies in CRMs or in data warehouses come back to confusion around which entity is this, right? So like, let's say you have a record, could be like Oracle Spain, where it has the website of oracle.com, and like, it's some notes that tell you that it's Oracle Spain, right? Like often what tends to happen is that you plug in different kinds of like enrichment providers, but they are talking about a different entity. Like the headcount of Oracle Global is very different from the headcount of Oracle Spain. And so I would say that's the root cause of a lot of data inaccuracy. And like until you solve that, you can't really get your data to a state where you can reliably make decisions on top of it without some kind of human verification.
What has surprised you about how far off, even some of the most well-run organizations have been?
I would say it's actually not so much that the organizations themselves are bad. I think quite often what surprises me is that how much money people are spending without the problems being solved, right? So I think a lot of revenue operations professionals will feel this like, the sales reps are like, why don't you fix this? Like this is your job. But the reality is that for a lot of organizations, like fixing the underlying data has historically been outside of the control of the RevOps team. And a very big part of what we're doing is like, how do we give people the controls, the tooling to be able to fix the data in their system, right? So that's been the most surprising thing. It's like people spend like, millions, in some cases millions, in some cases tens of millions of dollars on data, and people are still unhappy, right? That shouldn't be the case.
Is there a common moment that people see, when their team realizes that the problem is way bigger than they thought, and like, oh my God, we're spending these millions of dollars on this data, and we didn't realize it was this bad?
I would say historically, territory allocation or annual planning has been like the two big triggers for organizations to realize that the quality of their data is not good enough to reliably make decisions. One thing that's an interesting pattern that we're starting to see recently is that any attempt at using AI at scale on top of the CRM makes people very quickly realize that the data in the CRM is not good enough. And so like, one thing is like using an AI tool as a sales rep, like using some kind of like Copilot or using ChatGPT directly. Like usually that's like good enough. But like once you start to get to the point where you're operating organization wide on top of say like a 20-year-old Salesforce instance, that's when people realize, okay, actually like this big grand old like AI roadmap we have is like there's this massive wall in front of it, which is data accuracy. And until we fix data accuracy, we're not going to be able to do anything with AI at scale. But that's probably like a year ago was like 0% of our opportunities that had that as a compelling event. Now it's probably like 10 to 20%. I think a year from now it would be 100%.
Oh, 100%. Wow.
I think
So
it's like,
right now,
everyone wants to build with AI, and it doesn't work.
yeah,
So at some point people are gonna everyone will have to fix this.
yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. Like at some point, everyone will have to fix this because everyone's gonna be using AI. I mean, as far as we know, something big could happen in the next 10 years. Who knows? Where they're like, everyone's like, you know what? AI, got to shut it down. The robots are going to take over the world. But where we're sitting right now, that's probably not going to happen. Um, so, how deep does the problem go that you tend to find? So, the entity layer, the corporate hierarchies. Um, can you explain like how deep it really goes and uh, why why are these things breaking everything else downstream?
Yeah, so I think the answer is it goes all the way to the bottom, like as deep as you can imagine. Like it's like entity data accuracy is a prerequisite for any kind of other types of data accuracy, whether it's contact data or forecasting or annual planning or whatever it might be. The easiest way to illustrate it is domain names. So take like Oracle Global, the domain of Oracle Global is oracle.com. Take Oracle Spain, domain of Oracle Spain is also oracle.com. But fundamentally, like those are very different entities. And so being able to distinguish between those is really, really important. And historically, data providers have operated off of the domain oracle.com, and they will then return the same thing for two things that are fundamentally different. And an AI agent will not necessarily know the difference. And so that's when like errors start to compound. And so, yeah, so it starts from the beginning, basically. And I think unless you solve that root cause, you're not going to be able to truly solve the problem of data accuracy in your CRM. And people are waking up to that. It's a bit of a nuanced thing to understand, but like once you see it, you cannot unsee it.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is, I mean, I'm guessing it's related, but you can tell me if it's not. We've just recently started focusing more on LinkedIn campaigns and trying to like build targeting lists for LinkedIn for thought leadership posts and stuff like that. And while building these lists, we found like um, sometimes the name of the company that the AI will collect from the website or like the domain name isn't the exact same name that they have on LinkedIn, like on their company page. So when you're targeting for LinkedIn, you have to have the exact name that it shows up on the LinkedIn company page, or else it's like harder for it to find a match. Is that similar?
I think yes, that's one example. Like everything that's related to any kind of data that relates to the external world starts with a need for agreement about like what are we talking about, right? And so like if you take Kernel as an example, Kernel has the domain kernel.ai. We have the legal name Momentum AI Limited. That's what our company used to be called. There's also another company, it's a brain scanning company called Kernel. And there's also another company in the RevOps space that used to be called, that is called Momentum, that got acquired by Salesforce. And so unless you are like squeaky clean and like this is this kernel, you can end up with all sorts of different things downstream from that, whether that's like through LinkedIn campaigns, ads, contact enrichment, intent data, because they're very different companies. And so you're absolutely right. Most companies will probably be having ads that are going to accounts that are not the same accounts as the ones that the sales reps are prospecting into, because the marketing team does not use the same entity definition as the sales organization.
And so what does this mean for companies then? Like I'm assuming, salespeople are looking at their lists and they see the data that they get enriched with, and they're like, hey, I got to go to this website to look up this company before I call on them. They click on the link and it takes them to like the wrong website. So first they're wasting time having to realize that it's the wrong website. And then realizing that like whatever else data that they have on this account might be wrong. And then they're spending their own time needing to do their own research when it should have already just been handed to them. What else like goes wrong and breaks down operationally when this data is, you said 80% of these records have some kind of,
has some
yeah,
kind of,
yeah.
The way I would think about the cost of entity data inaccuracy, it starts with direct spend. Like you're spending money on data providers, consultancies, deduplication tools, and it's not necessarily working. Then you have a lot of indirect spend that usually sits with the sales organization. probably on average, it's somewhere between like 2 hours and a day a week per sales rep that goes to some kind of data correction or data disputes. So that's like a drag on revenue. When it starts to directly impact revenue is accounts that are inaccurately assigned to sales reps. So broadly speaking, like probably like 20% of all accounts that are assigned to sales reps are wrong. Like they're not ICP, like SMB accounts assigned to enterprise reps, out of business, whatever it might be. And if you can reassign those sales resources towards accounts that are ICP, that usually like quickly comes into the like millions of dollars in sales capacity. And then there's like a lot of like sort of hidden costs, like, worse planning, worse decisions, worse segmentations, worse ads that can be a bit hard to measure. But I actually think AI has done us a bit of a favor in the sense that it's now very, very visible that the data is not good enough to reliably do things in an automated way. It's just that we used to live in this world where we accepted the fact that we would have hundreds of people who would work around the data inaccuracies. But like you look inside of sales, or like you might not be able to trust it. But a language model doesn't know, right? So like you have to somehow give the language model the tooling to say like this is the verified truth, and you can now make decisions based off of that truth.
How do we, and I know that like the answer might be like just get Kernel, but like how do we start working on this this technical debt, and like how do we figure out, like, let's say a CRO revenue leader listening to this is wondering like, oh, how bad is it in my organization? Like you're saying 86% of all records have an error. How do I figure out what my percentage is? And like, how do I see the symptoms of this issue? Because it seems like a lot of like pinhole leaks that aren't super apparent right away. So how is somebody supposed to like really figure out where this is happening in their company?
I think like a very practical way to do it is to say, okay, like where do you hear a noise about data, right? So most chief revenue officers who can be like, they hear that accounts are missing in APAC, or like the SMB team is unhappy because we inaccurately segmented accounts based on headcount, but the SMB reps think the headcount data is wrong. So like usually there is noise somewhere. And I think the easiest way to like figure out like what is the root cause of that is to literally just take some of those examples and just like trace them from like end to end. Like what went wrong here? What is the actual truth? And it doesn't have to be that many. Like even if I think most people, like if the RevOps leader and the chief revenue officer went through 5 accounts together, like this is an account that the rep thinks should be in the CRM, but it was not in the CRM. This is an account that the SMB rep thinks should be mid-market, but is not. Like whatever that might be. And what will usually emerge is the domains are wrong. The names are wrong. There are duplicate records. And I think that creates like a shared understanding of like the cost of inaccurate foundational entity data. And then it's just a question like, how do you then go out to solve that? And yeah, that could be with Kernel. You can try other things. Like I don't want to turn it into like a grand sales pitch. Like the reality is like, you can try all sorts of different things, but like if you're not aligned on what the problem is, then what tends to happen is people just layer and layer and layer things on top. So for example, a lot of go-to-market tools operate off of the domain. If you buy more go-to-market tools, you'll have more tools that operate off of the domain. But the vast majority of CRMs, one, the domains are usually not accurate, and 2, the domains are not a reliable predictor of unique entities. For example, you sell into large enterprise, a lot of entities have similar domains. And I think like getting that sort of slightly more nuanced understanding makes it easier for people to then come around the table and say, okay, like we have to fix this problem first.
So how does Kernel fix the problem? Like when you guys when you found that this problem existed for your other product you're trying to make, and you decided to fix it for yourselves, what were the steps that you first took to start creating something that could do this at scale?
Yeah, so I mean, we've been through all sorts of different edge cases. Like what makes this problem hard is that there is a gazillion different edge cases, and you really have to like capture all of those. But the the most important question that we have to answer on behalf of our customers is, which entity is this? There is a record in CRM. It usually has a name, usually has a domain. It might have an opportunity, it might have some notes, it might have some other fields. It needs to be a shared understanding of what is it. And the way we do that at Kernel is with what we call the Kern ID, the Kernel Entity Reference Number, which is a unique identifier for every corporate entity in the world that we can use to ensure we're talking about the same thing. Once we know we're talking about the same thing, then we can start to do all of the downstream things. Like, okay, what's the corporate hierarchy? What's the headcount of this entity? Maybe you can start to like use web research agents for more custom data points. But if you're talking about the wrong thing, like if you think I'm talking about Starbucks Corporation and I think I'm talking about Starbucks around the corner, who by the way have the same domain, then everything else is going to be a complete waste of time.
Interesting. So from like a company's perspective, who like not like Kernel's perspective, that you guys already know, like you have all these programs and ways to figure this stuff out, but how, before Kernel existed, how would a company be able to do something like this? Just people. Yeah,
I think like that is the reality. Like it's very, very common that there are two paths to solving a data problem. There's buy data and there's correct data. And before AI, the way to correct data was with humans. And I would like strongly encourage, like whether you use Kernel or not, like anyone should try and like clean and correct data with AI. Like it's absolutely like a worthwhile endeavor. I'm obviously biased towards Kernel, but like I'm not here to argue that you should try and do nothing. Like you should do something for sure. Like otherwise, and the way that people used to do it was which either they would ignore it, and then a large number of humans would work around it. And by large numbers, I mean the entire go-to-market organization, say like 500 people, or they would have specialists, freelancers, outsourced labor, BPOs, a smaller number of people whose full-time job it is to try and correct the data.
Yeah, and that's just not scalable.
No.
Once you have thousands and thousands of accounts to deal with. At what level is it the responsibility of processors and the salespeople and marketing or whoever to follow a specific process and be inputting things into the CRM as accurately as they can, and then for like the RevOps team to ensure that they have the correct fields and stuff in the CRM so that it creates like guardrails for these teams inputting this data consistently and accurately and as much to the best of their ability.
That is for sure part of it. And I think once companies reach a certain scale, like data governance is a real thing and is important. But I also think it's like, it's important to be pragmatic and say like, if you do that as a young company, that is for sure premature optimization. Like if I get a company that has like $1 million in AR and they're like, oh yeah, we have like, we use the Salesforce sandbox and like, we don't allow people to create, reps allowed to create accounts, and we have this like support process for things that fall between territories. I would tell like that sounds like a complete waste of time for a company of use stage. And so what makes it hard is that as companies grow, they accumulate a large amount of data debt from having not had that data governance. And I think what great RevOps and data teams do is that they come in with a pragmatic view and say, okay, there are two parts to this equation. One is like, how do we cure the pain, and then the other one is like, how do we prevent the pain from coming back? And a big part of prevention for sure is to have great governance, great tooling, great systems, great processes, but don't do it for the fun of it. You should do it if it solves a business problem.
That's fair. Yeah. There is something to be said for not like putting too much on your reps, because if it's too complicated and there's too much for them to like add into the CRM, they're not going to do it. And they're just going to be very upset with you. So almost every go-to-market team we talk to has built some kind of AI tooling. So they've got a bot here, an automation there. None of them are really connected to each other. Do you see this across your customer base too? Like what's actually happening with these disjointed AI workflows?
Yeah, it was interesting. I was at a RevFest conference in New York last week, and there was sort of one thing that was interesting is that like it feels like there are two camps when it comes to like AI projects. There's the governance camp, and then there's the let the reps loose and like learn camp, and I think both of them have merit. My best guess on, and this is a bit of a politician answer, but like my best guess on like where things will land is somewhere in the middle. And what I mean by in the middle is there are certain processes that should be centralized. The obvious ones are the ones where people have different incentives for data to be in a certain state, right? So like reps might have incentives for the headcount number to be X, and the company might have an incentive for the headcount number in the CRM to be Y, because that's how the territories are caught. Like that's a clear thing that should be centralized. But then you have certain things where you might benefit from reps having some level of flexibility in terms of like understanding, like the one obvious example could be like account research, for example, or some level of flexibility for AEs in terms of like how they use AI tooling for their prospecting. And so I think what we're seeing that the best RevOps teams do is provide some level of flexibility. Whether it's for sales reps is an open question, but at least for the wider, organization, but with clear guardrails for how to do that well. Because most likely we'll now we have, the way I think about like the phases we've gone through with AI is like we've went through like this sort of mega hype phase. Then we probably where we are now is like the make it work in production phase. Like things are working is a question of like what's working, and like it has to be somewhat orchestrated chaos. I think the next phase is going to be around like how do we, as part of that like now slightly more orchestrated way of thinking about AI, how do we then decide what's a distraction and what's not a distraction, right? Like because it's helpful as an organization for sales reps to be familiar with the use of AI, but the reality is that that's not their job. Their job is to sell, right? So there comes a point in time, okay, like you do this thing on your weekend and you do this thing on your job, and like this is where we draw the line as an organization, because there is a lot of like productivity theater. It's easy to feel productive with AI. That doesn't mean you are productive. And I think that's ultimately like the sort of line is going to be drawn somewhere, and I think people are sort of still figuring out exactly where that is, but I think it's important to be deliberate about it.
Quick pause. Everything we talk about on this show, diagnosing go-to-market ops, prioritizing projects for revenue impact, processes, metrics, insights, building a predictable go-to-market engine, we've built frameworks for all of it. They're free and ungated on our website, unionsquareconsulting.com/frameworks. The link will also be in the show notes, so make sure you check that out. All right, back to the episode. I can't remember who Eddie was talking to on the podcast a while ago now, but they were talking about phase, I think Craig Rosenberg, it might have been. He was talking about phase 1 and phase 2 AI and what they were seeing in their data on companies that were actually getting results with AI. So companies doing phase 1 AI was like productivity based. So being able to send out more emails, being able to cut down hours doing a certain task. Phase 2 AI was stuff around a certain business outcome. So like AI call scoring, getting AI to help with coaching to make your salespeople better. So it's like AI like listening into your sales calls and being able to pick out like where you're falling off, where the lead is, disengaging, stuff like that, what you can do better. And they found that companies doing phase 1 AI did see some results with it, but the vast majority of results came from companies with a combination of both, specifically with phase 2, but a combination of both saw the best results. So not just focusing on productivity, because it can be so easy to just be like, oh, we use AI all the time, we're AI first, and all you're using AI for is to like be kind of your assistant to like cut down tasks. But having a specific business goal and business outcome in mind, something that ties directly to revenue, and finding ways for AI to help with that.
Yes. I mean, yes, I think ultimately like outcomes have to move or nothing, nothing moves. And right, I think like there's sort of like it's easy when you go through these like big changes to the way that the world works to like forget about the like physics of business. But the reality is that like, businesses sort of exist to like make more revenue and reduce cost, and like the same will hold true eventually for like how we use AI.
So do you see like with the companies that you're seeing using Kernel and stuff, which ones, or I guess you probably can't speak to like actual companies, but even just anonymously, what use cases are you seeing them getting the most results?
I would say like the by far most leveraged intervention that a RevOps team can do with better data is in territory design. Like there's just no question. Like that territory design sits upstream from pretty much all revenue generation, and getting it right is a multi-million-dollar problem to solve, and it can cause both a lot of frustration, but it can also cause significant revenue loss. And so I think that remains the main use case. Then there's like a long list of things that are somewhat adjacent to that could be optimizing ad spend, bad debt prevention, from like making sure you know which company you're selling into and will they have any kind of like credit risk. It could be like headcount segmentation, headcount planning, forecasting, like everything like somewhat relates to data. But I think the biggest ROI use case is for sure territory design. I think the biggest ROI use case a year from now will move more towards productive use of AI tooling, but we're not quite there yet. Right? So like we are saying, customers adopt tools like Claude Code, like sits on top of the data warehouse and able to do things that can move like millions and millions of dollars, but it's still a subset, I would say, that like does that effectively at scale. But it's changing. And if you're not on it, like I think, not to be like fear mongering, but like there is a big difference in terms of the go-to-market efficiency of a go-to-market organization where the RevOps team is able to effectively use AI tooling across the entire system of record, and one where the RevOps team is only able to use AI tooling for individual like rep use case. Like the difference is massive. That doesn't mean that like there can still be like a difference in like, what do you build, what do you buy. That depends on like capabilities. It depends like, where do you think you want to build like, competitive advantage. But I don't think as a RevOps organization you really have a choice but to think about, okay, what needs to hold true in order for us to make this technology work effectively at scale across the entire system of record.
So what do you think is the solution to that?
Like, how do you get started?
Yeah.
I do think that like there are sort of two parts to it. Like one is like, where do you put your resource in terms of like which problem to solve? And then the other one is like, how do you get your current state to be good enough in order for you to be able to solve it? In terms of which problems to focus on, I think that's like the principles of prioritization have not necessarily changed. It's like, like which one do you think will have the biggest business impact? What do you hear from the field? Like, is it like account research takes a lot of time? Is it like the territories are not good enough, or like we're not ramping reps fast enough? I think that's just a question of like, these are all the possible initiatives. Let's rank them. In terms of which ones you then get the benefit of using AI the most, is really a question like, where are humans today processing data in a way that can be processed by AI? And that sort of like ties it back to this prerequisite point of, there's no question in my mind that like the most important thing to be able to use AI effectively is to get your data in a state where when a language model uses that data, what you get out on the other end is reliable and it's trustworthy.
Is there a specific result or story or use case that you can anonymously talk about? I know it's probably might be like sensitive information, so let me know if you can't, but like results that you've seen or like a specific issue that they were having and the way that they fixed it and then the results they saw on the other side.
Yeah, so one of the case studies that's live on our website is from a company called AlphaSense, which like many of our other customers uses Kernel as the like primary provider of entity data for all global go-to-market operations, and their estimates were that a 20% reduction in rep time spent on like research, disputes, data corrections, and so on, and a 15% increase in overall revenue capacity for the organization when it comes to like the efficiency of the territories that are assigned. And like that quickly runs into the tens of millions of dollars. That's also why I think it is so important as a RevOps organization that you think about these like system level initiatives rather than the like rep level initiatives. The system level initiatives are the ones that will move your entire P&L, whereas the rep level initiatives might give you like a productivity boost for individual reps, but it's just not, I would say the juice is not worth the squeeze to the same extent.
So when that data layer is solid, what changes for the people on top of it, the reps, RevOps leaders, leadership? What can they do now that they couldn't do before?
I would say the key word from an emotional perspective is trust, right? Like once you trust your data, you can start to make decisions using that data. Like data on its own doesn't really have any intrinsic value. Data is only valuable to the extent that it changes the decisions that you would make. And to do that, you need to trust it. I would say specifically for RevOps seems like that could be more confidence in like how many reps can we ramp and where should we ramp them. That's obviously like a very big question, right? For big companies, that drives a very big part of the P&L. Another key component is like, do we have confidence that the accounts that are assigned to sales reps are of a sufficiently good quality that we give them the ingredients to hit quota? Say those two things combined, for most B2B businesses, drives the entire business, right? So like that's really, really, really critical. And that's also why like often when I speak with companies, they will have gone through all sorts of pain to try and solve that manually before.
That's so important, yeah.
Right.
I was just saying this so important, yeah, especially for companies that have stakeholders and like they want accurate forecasts. And the CRO, you need to give an accurate forecast of what you think, the revenue that you think you're going to produce in the next 2 quarters, 3 quarters out. If you don't have an engine that you can like predictably and consistently, see the outcome of, then it's going to be so much harder to be able to like tell your stakeholders like this is what we're going to be making.
Yes. So
6 months from now.
Those are definitely the two biggest things that are like downstream from trust. And I think there's also like a sort of slightly more emotional thing for a lot of RevOps people, which is like the reality is that like RevOps professionals are usually like highly educated, fairly technical people who have the capabilities to have a impact organization wide. But a lot of RevOps people are stuck like answering like individual data requests in Slack or doing like list uploads from conferences or whatever it might be. Like I think being able to like automate a large part of that away frees up RevOps resources for things that contribute more proactively towards growth. But it's a bit harder to quantify, but that doesn't mean that it can be valuable.
Yeah, we talk about that all the time. We have a framework, actually, the RevOps / go-to-market roadmap, where it's essentially trying to help RevOps professionals like figure out how to triage big RevOps projects with the fire drills that are constantly coming up. Because you're right, like it's the bane of probably any RevOps person's existence is trying to do projects that they know are going to be better for the company in the long run, but they just have no time because everyone has something that they need them to do. Like, and it's always urgent. It's always like a fire that they have to put out right now.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of RevOps people who just like deleted Slack. It's like it's not Slack's a way to deal with it, but it's maybe also not the most culturally coherent way to deal with it.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine, man. So you're running workshops for your customers using Claude Code for RevOps use cases like territory planning and hierarchy mapping. What are teams actually building in those sessions?
Right. So I think, again, it comes down to like the key thing that's been unlocked by AI is the ability to do things that would previously require either a lot of developer resources or a lot of human resources. And so sort of like reduce the cost of customization. And so what people tend to do with those tools, whether it's now workshops or outside of those workshops, is to do the things that they wish they had the resources to do, but would just have been like completely out of reach historically. An example of that could be, how do we make sure that the corporate hierarchies that feed into our territory allocation for enterprise segment, where we accurately reflect like what are actually the relevant buying centers within these hierarchies that we want our reps to prospect into. Historically, that's been something where it's like, do you do it with freelancers? Do you just wait for the reps to collect them themselves? But now we can actually say, okay, like we have the data foundation. Now let's use AI to say, okay, like here's Disney or here's Google. Which ones of these entities do we actually want to assign to reps? Like that could be an example of something that's very well suited for AI at scale. And that's the lens that I would generally, whether you use tools like Claude Code or other things, that's the lens I would generally recommend that people take when they like look at like, is this problem suitable for AI or not? You sort of have to ask yourself, one, can a human do it with unlimited time? If a human can't do it with unlimited time, doesn't mean that it's impossible for AI, but like at least it's like it makes it harder. And then like assuming a human can do it with unlimited time is like, okay, like is it like data processing where we can somehow give an agent directions that it can reliably trust to process things at scale? And again, it's like these are people who deal with large complex CRMs. And I think it's not super valuable to think of, even if you might test at a smaller scale, it's not super valuable to think, okay, like what can we do for this one rep? It's much more valuable to think about like what can we do for the system that changes the behavior of all of our reps? And we can then test it with one rep. But I think RevOps people can waste a lot of time optimizing for individual reps rather than optimizing for the system itself.
And I think maybe I just use AI differently than in the ways that you're describing. Because when I hear like, can a human do it with unlimited time? My answer for a lot of things that I use AI for, the answer is like, well, yes. But can the AI do it at all? Because like, I don't know, maybe it's different for what I use AI for versus what you use it for. But I find that like AI gets things wrong so often and it's such a pain. And like I'll have it doing a task and even just like data sorting and stuff, I'll have it do a task. And I have to always double check what it's doing to make sure it actually did it right the first time at all. Do you find that as like an issue, or how do you deal with that when trying to do these workshops and trying to build out these AI use cases?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there is probably like a slight difference in where I have like a bit of a bias here, is that like our entire business is predicated on like how do we get AI to behave? Like how do we get AI to do what we wanted to do? And we obviously invest an enormous amount of resources in trying to do that. And so I do think that your experience is probably more aligned with the general experience of RevOps professionals, which is, well, it can not do this thing, and clearly you're right, and like it often fails. So like, why would it be able to do this much bigger thing? And I think that is a good question to ask, and the answer I think is like, of this bigger thing, like let's sort of like cut it down into like something that's like a manageable chunk that can be processed reliably. So for example, it's like it's much easier to get AI to reliably fix, say, like one custom data point from like web research that goes into one field in Salesforce that can be validated with like a test set and with good examples, than it is to get AI to do something that has like slightly more vague instructions. I think we'll probably get there, but a very big part of like Kernel, the product, which I think, RevOps people can take inspiration from, is that also like, how do we break down these problems into like manageable chunks that we can evaluate the agent's performance against, because you are right. Like when just let loose, it's a bit hit and miss for sure, and there's a lot of, it's always easy for, I read like an interesting tweet the other day. There's like, CEOs have like just completely like lost, touch with like what can actually, like what can reliably be done with AI, because they don't necessarily see the last mile. And I think that is probably true, right? The devil is in the detail. And I think the best RevOps people are very good at like getting the problem defined clearly enough that you can get to the level of detail and align everyone around. Like, okay, like how do we actually solve this?
I think there's a lot of times too where it's just like AI just can't do it. Like you need a person, like you need a human touch to figure it out. And I do like a lot of creative work as a marketer. So maybe that's less relevant for people doing work with mostly numbers and data and stuff. I'm sure it is. But yeah, I feel like sometimes it's just like AI can't do it. Like maybe a person could do it with unlimited time for sure, but AI can't do it with any number of tries.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it's some of it is also just trying and seeing if it works.
So one thing that came up in our prep is that so this isn't just a RevOps problem. It touches finance, billing, forecasting, everything. How does fixing entity data become a cross-functional initiative, and who needs to be driving it?
I think RevOps is very uniquely positioned to drive it in most organizations. Once companies reach a certain size, they might have like data teams or master data management teams within which it makes sense for some of these data specific problems to sit. The way that it becomes cross-functional is really that like the foundational data in the CRM answers the questions like, who are our customers? Who are our potential customers, and who are our partners? Which for most B2B businesses, like that is what the business is. Right? So like answering that question sort of like feeds into pretty much everything in the organization. To give some specific examples of that could be, how do you align marketing and sales, right? Like that's like the age-old question. Books have been written. A good first step is to make sure that they are focused on the same target accounts. What's a prerequisite for having the same target accounts is being aligned on like what is the data that defines whether something is a target account. A prerequisite for that is accurate data. So like that's like the most obvious thing. But then when it comes to, for example, some of the interaction between the go-to-market organization and the finance function, that could be everything from like are there patterns in our customers where we can see that they are bad buyers? That could be literally non-ICP, or it could be things like bad debt, right? Then you start to have an interaction between the RevOps data and some of the like, credit risk data. Another interaction with like strategy or finances for our annual planning. How many sales reps can we hire, and which regions should we hire them for? If you don't have a good data foundation, it's very, very hard to answer that question without just sort of like praying for good weather, which is usually not a very productive way to So it sort of interferes with everything. And I think one of the great things for RevOps, like technically minded revenue leaders in general, and for RevOps specifically, is that these technologies will elevate the importance of that function to like more strategically important, because they are so uniquely positioned to fix the data that is a prerequisite for running the entire business.
Absolutely. And I'd say even customer success too, like as you go after the sale, because especially with like these tech companies that are recurring revenue businesses, like if you're selling, let's say you have an ICP you think is your ideal customer persona because they buy really easily, but they never stick around. They have horrible adoption. They don't actually use the product, and then they churn after 6 months. So that's probably not even your ICP. But if you don't have that data layer that's communicating to marketing and to sales that like this customer is actually a horrible customer and we're not even getting enough like lifetime value for them to justify what we're spending to get them, you're going to be hemorrhaging revenue and not understand why, because everything's going to seem like it's running perfectly and like everything is where it should be.
Completely agree.
Yeah. All right. So we're running up on time here, Anders. I wanted to ask, was there any question that like I missed asking or didn't ask that would encompass something that you've been wanting to talk about or that you feel like you don't talk about enough?
I think like one, and we have sort of touched a bit upon it in a few different places, is like tomorrow, how do I start? Like I think a lot of RevOps people feel like they're behind. I can tell you that they're, in the vast majority of cases, they're not. Like everyone is behind. Like it's changing so fast, and like it's very hard to keep up. My recommendation to people is like try and just like do some targeted experimentation. Like you don't have to necessarily have the perfect tooling. Like usually just starting with the model providers themselves is a good place to start, and like try and break the problems down into like small pieces of it that you can test at a small scale. And I think like building confidence from there. And so for those who like sit out there and like, oh, I don't know where to start, I feel like so behind, so like get some revenue leaders in a room, say, okay, like these are all the problems that we have, like which one do we think is most important? Like maybe even ask AI how to where to use AI, or just like say, okay, like how try and break it down, start one place, like take 50 accounts or whatever it might be, and get going from there. Otherwise people can quickly get stuck in sort of paralysis analysis. But the reality is that like everyone is trying, no one has really figured this out yet.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, especially on LinkedIn, if you're like me and you're chronically online on LinkedIn, it can be easy to think that there are so many people that have it all figured out. And there's so many people that are, showing their workflows and their AI hacks and everything, and feeling like, oh man, I just learned what Claude Code was last week. Like I'm so behind. But yeah, everyone really is in the same boat. And the people, I think, well, maybe, I'm sure there are some people who like really, really know what they're talking about. But I think a lot of the people who act like they're gurus right now with AI, probably aren't nearly as far ahead as you think they are, because it's new. All of this is so new to us, and it's changing every single day. How could you be a master at something that just really started being a thing in the last couple of years? So that's my take on it.
Completely agree.
All right, Anders. So where can people find you if they want to follow along with what you're doing or check Kernel out?
Yeah. So what if, in terms of like following along, like my LinkedIn profile is a good place to start. Just go on LinkedIn, search for Anders Krohn. I'm sure my name will appear wherever you listen to this podcast. Or if you want to understand more about Kernel, then our website, kernel.ai.
Awesome. And those links will also be in the show notes as well. Thank you so much, Anders. Have a really great rest of your day.
Yes, great to see you. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for listening to the episode. If this resonated, please give us a 5-star rating and a follow. It helps us reach more people, and you get our latest and greatest content without having to search for it. And if you're looking for hands-on help in go-to-market strategy and/or RevOps, please reach out to us. We help our clients with everything from annual planning to improving processes in go-to-market, implementing systems to support those processes, and go-to-market AI. We're always happy to offer a free consultation to help you identify the best opportunities to improve your go-to-market engine with or without our help. You can find us at unionsquareconsulting.com, and the info will be in our show notes.